We have a few updates on the averted rail strike situation. So just, I'm sure you guys probably recall, but railroad workers very unhappy with the working conditions that they have been laboring under, with basically no paid sick leave or real time off. And so they were ready to strike. Because of the Railway Labor Act, ultimately, Congress, at the behest of Biden, was able to come in and cram down this deal that a majority of the workers voted against, that had been struck between the rail bosses and the union leaders. So I won't go into all the nitty-gritty of how that went down, but basically, end of story, this deal that has one day of paid sick leave gets crammed down on them, and that is where we stand. However, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. So this is from Common Dreams. They said Biden is being urged to sign an executive order which would guarantee rail workers paid sick leave. Now, here's the mechanics of this. Back under Obama actually signed an executive order that would mandate at least 7, which was the number of days that these workers were asking for as well, paid sick days for employees of federal contractors. Now, that should apply to rail workers because all of these rail freight companies are, in fact, federal contractors. However, when Obama signed this executive order, for some unknown reason, he included a specific exclusion clause for rail workers. But there is zero reason why President Biden could not sign the exact same executive order, which would be a good thing, putting the rail workers aside, mandating at least 7 paid sick days and not have the exclusion for rail workers this time around. And in fact, urged and encouraged by the unions themselves. Bernie, let's go ahead and put this next piece up on the screen, is leading 72 House and Senate Democrats in urging President Biden to sign an executive order that would do exactly that. So this was their plan after the attempt to get sick days added through the legislative process. After that failed, this is now the new push from union leaders. And I just don't see any way, what excuse can you make for not doing this? The legal precedent already exists, so it's not even a stretch of your legal authorities. It's the exact same executive order that Obama signed. All you have to do is get rid of that exclusion clause for rail workers, and there you go. You have at least somewhat of a win for these workers when, President Biden claims to be Mr. Labor, claims to be the most pro-labor president in history. You got a chance. Prove that you actually care about these human beings and that you didn't just, sell them down the river at the first possible chance.
Throw the next one up there on the screen because this is important. The issue is that these people are federal contractors, and that is why we have the authority. I actually fully support the whole using government policy against federal contractors to try and compel behavior because they can choose not to do business with the government if they want, and yet they aren't. And here, what Ryan really outlaid is that the way that many of these private companies have leveraged their private status to boost profits, take government, and then also use their influence to go after the GOP. And what Ryan reveals is that railroad workers were on track to get the 10-11 Senate Republican votes for sick days. However, after the Chamber of Commerce came out and said that it would, quote, score the vote, 4 of the hard yes votes evaporated and they only got 6 on the day of the vote. If they'd gotten 10 or 11 votes, Krystal, they would have actually passed a sick leave measure. And so the railroad companies, which again make billions of dollars and billions and more in profits in the last 10 years, and who have basically bought the congressional system, use the Chamber of Commerce as their lobbying organization to protect their profits.
Yes.
And it's all really a corrupt scheme because the Republicans could not afford, or in their minds could not afford, getting a bad vote scored by the Chamber of Commerce.
Pathetic.
It's like it all rolls together. And I think it's why it's important to lay out the exact context here.
It shows you how powerful the Chamber of Commerce continues to be. It shows you how powerful capital in general continues to be, any sort of pro-worker rhetoric aside. Losing Manchin also, I think, over the Chamber of Commerce scoring just grotesque was also a big blow to them. But, Ryan goes through, and I encourage you to read the whole story because he really has the in-depth breakdown of what was happening on Capitol Hill and how these negotiations were all unfolding, what the union leaders, and in particular this one sort of militant caucus of rank and file workers, what they were pushing for. for in terms of what they wanted legislators to ultimately do, and also the deep and very justified sense of betrayal of Biden and the Democrats, because again, they heard the rhetoric about most pro-labor president in history. There's a reason why they waited till Biden was in the White House to really make this move and push for more. And ultimately, you know, they ended up with this presidential emergency board proposal, which was total shit. Then they end up with this negotiation between Pete Buttigieg and Marty Walsh, his labor secretary, and the union leaders and the rail bosses, which was only a moderate incremental improvement. And they said they kind of knew from the beginning that they were ultimately going to get a deal crammed down on them from Congress because of the Railway Labor Act and the way that hands so much power ultimately to the rail bosses, the way it really strips them of any sort of ultimate leverage. But they thought maybe with Biden and the Democrats, they could get a bit more than what they were ultimately able to achieve here. And there were also a lot of questions over whether the vote on paid sick days that went through that passed the House and then got a majority of votes in the Senate but failed because of the filibuster in the Senate, whether this was just a show vote or whether they really thought that maybe this had a chance to get through. And according to Ryan's reporting, you know, there was some indication that they might actually be able to get there. Now, I think they knew it was a Hail Mary. I think they knew their goose was kind of cooked at that point because Biden decided to side with the rail bosses in such a heavy-handed manner. But they really thought they had a realistic shot at this. And now, like I said, to start the block, the real play here is to try to pressure Biden to sign this executive order, which there is just literally no reason not to do it other than just caving to corporate interests. If you polled the American people on this, 7 paid sick days for federal employees of federal contractors, what would it poll at? 70%, 80%? I mean, it would be overwhelming. This is the most basic of worker rights that should be in place for every single worker in the country. So if he doesn't do this, I mean, it's just already such a betrayal, and this is ultimately completely pathetic.
And it is just straight up discrimination against the rail workers because it's specifically excluded by law, which it should not be, as a total carve out to the companies. And again, the companies, they can do business elsewhere. They don't have to do business with the federal government, but they make billions in federal government contracts. There go. Federal policy should be that you can't get a contract unless you abide by X, Y, and Z work conditions. It doesn't sound like crazy to me.
Not at all. And this is a man who promised on the campaign trail that he would not give federal contracts to union busters. Right. So he used that rhetoric on the trail of using the federal government power of the purse in order to make sure that companies were doing the basics and doing right by their workers. So here's an opportunity to prove you actually mean it, Joe Biden. And also, just as another side note, I think we're going to talk to the Lever more about this because they broke this story over on their site. But one of the big rail freight companies, like immediately after this deal was crammed down workers' throats, announced they were doing a big shareholder dividend. So the backstory of all of this, as you always point out, Saagar, is the record-breaking amounts of profit that these companies, one of which, by the way, is owned by Warren Buffett, that they are raking in while they deny their workers the very basics of paid sick leave.
Yeah.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.